So now we've answered the first part of the question. What is the difference between an attitude and an opinion? Remember, attitudes are what's in our head or in our hearts, what we feel or what we think, but they cannot be observed. Opinions are what we express, what we say. Sometimes we express it by answering public opinion polls. Sometimes we might express it by writing a letter to the editor. Sometimes we express an opinion by going ahead and voting. But in order for it to be an opinion, it's something we have to express. It's something we have to express. Now, so that's the public. If we go back to the definition, and I'm going to scroll up in my notes so that I can read it one more time. Public opinions are the combined individual opinions, not the attitudes, because we can't observe the attitudes. We can only observe the opinions. The combined individual opinions shared by some part of society. Now, why do I say some part of society? Well, as it turns out, some public opinion polls go ahead and different public opinion polls ask different people questions. Some pollsters are interested in the opinions of all adults, anybody who's over 18 years old. Some public opinion polls are more interested in going ahead and finding out the views of registered voters. They're not as interested in people who aren't voting, because oftentimes what they want to know is President Obama going to get reelected or elected? And people who aren't going to vote, they're not going to have an effect on whether or not President Obama gets elected or not. And then sometimes what they want is not just the people who are registered voters, people who might vote, but they want to go ahead and find out the views of what they call likely voters. People who they're pretty sure are going to vote. Because as you probably know, if you've read it in your book, the percentage of the population that votes is really, really low. Really low. And so sometimes pollsters, they don't want to, it's fine to find out what all adults think, but come an election, like come the election in November, all adults aren't going to vote. And even all people who are registered aren't going to vote. But these people who they call likely voters, these are the people who get out and vote. So if you can figure out what likely voters think, it gives you a really good idea of what's going to happen during the election. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and once again, you're going to take a look at your lecture notes, and there are a series of questions that are asked. And I want you to go ahead and I want you to answer each of the questions. First, under adults, there's just one question. Are you 18 years or older? And you circle, either yes or no, and then you're just going to keep track of your score. So the second one is questions about registered voters. You're going to go ahead and answer those two questions. And then the last one, there are more questions. There are 4 questions, and you're going to answer those questions. And again, for each one, keep your score. So your score for adults is either going to be 1 or 0. Your score for registered voters is either going to be 2, 1, or 0. And then your score for adults is going to be, for likely voters, is going to be anywhere between 4 points and 0 points. So go ahead, put me on pause. Try not to make it so that when you pause me, I'm doing some weird face, because that's not cool. Even if I'm not there, that's not cool, and you know it. So put me on pause. As a matter of fact, give me some time and I'll just sit like that, and then you can pause me. And answer those questions and get your score. And then once you've got your score, turn me back on again. Okay, so now you've gotten your score. And I want you to go ahead and look at the results and see if you can figure this out. So I want you to go ahead and see if you can figure this out by yourself before you go ahead and hear my answer to the question. In the adult section, if your adult score equals 1, this is actually an easy one, you are an adult. So if you're over 18 years old, you're an adult. But would you be considered a registered voter? If your registered voter total is less than 2, you are not a registered voter. And so if a pollster calls up and they're really interested in finding out the views of registered voters, as soon as you answer no to either one of those questions, they'll be like, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Hey, have fun. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Gotta go. And they'll hang up on you. And then even more so if you're a likely voter, if your likely voter score is less than 4, you are not a likely voter either. And so in each one of those cases, depending on what your answers and depending on what the pollsters, the people who are actually doing the polls, what they're interested in, they're going to go ahead and they're going to take your answers and they're going to find out whether or not they're going to even waste their time going ahead and asking you questions. Now, why would people ask different things of different people? Well, some people, again, are interested in what all adults think. But because we're trying to predict what happens in elections, oftentimes, and we want to know what's going to happen in elections, we want to know about the people who are most likely to participate. So I want you to think about this. And it may be simple, but sort of reason this out. Which of the three groups is most likely to participate? Adults, registered voters, or likely voters? Well, hopefully you said likely voters, because likely voters is the correct answer. They're the ones who are most likely to get out and vote. Okay, so that's pretty obvious. But I want you to think about this. It's a little bit more complicated, but if you think about it, it makes sense. And you can pause me to think about it if you want to. That's always fine. But again, don't pause me when I have a weird look on my face. Which group do you think is the group that has the strongest political views? Who has the strongest political views? Adults, registered voters, or likely voters? You can pause me or just, I'm going to give you the answer in a second. So, likely voters. So as you go from adults to registered voters to likely voters, what you have is people who have increasingly strong opinions. And so sometimes what people will do is they'll compare the results of public opinion polls. And they'll say, public opinion polls suck. This one here, President Obama's approval rating is 54% say they approve. And then there's another poll that was taken right around the same time, and only 43% say they approve. See, polls are terrible. They're awful. They don't work. Why would you get such big results, big differences? Well, part of the reason that you might get a big difference is one poll was polling all adults, and one poll was polling likely voters. So whenever you compare public opinion polls, you always have to make sure if the public opinion polls are polling the same people. Who's included in their sample? Who are the people that they're asking questions to? Because not all polls are the same. And that's really important. Okay, so this is going to end this video, and then we'll move on to the next aspect of public opinion.